I want to start with a question. What would you do if you weren't afraid of failing? Most people don't answer honestly. Why? Because we've been taught that failure is shameful, that being vulnerable is weakness. But here's the truth. We've been taught to associate vulnerability with weakness for most of our lives. From the time we're young, many of us are told not to cry, not to show too much emotion, not to let anyone see when we're scared, uncertain, or overwhelmed. The cultural narrative has shaped us to believe that to be strong, we must be guarded. We must have it all together. We must always be in control. But Brené Brown challenges this narrative, and she challenges it with research, stories, and truth. Vulnerability, according to her years of study, is not about winning or losing. It's not about being emotionally raw for attention. It's about the willingness to show up and be seen, even when there are no guarantees. Think about that. Showing up in a job interview, even when you're terrified you're not qualified. Telling someone you love them, even when they may not say it back. Speaking your truth in a room where everyone else might disagree. That's vulnerability, and it takes enormous strength. It's much easier to hide, to avoid hard conversations, to numb discomfort with distractions, food, alcohol, social media, overwork. But avoidance is not bravery. It's self-protection. It's fear in disguise. True strength is saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm still here. It's asking for help when your pride is begging you not to. It's admitting you're hurt instead of pretending you're fine. Those are not moments of failure. Those are moments of real, unfiltered courage. Courage isn't flashy. It doesn't always come with applause. Most often, it looks like quietly choosing honesty over hiding, presence over avoidance, and love over fear, again and again. We need to unlearn what we've been taught about vulnerability. Because when we mistake vulnerability for weakness, we close the door on growth, connection, empathy, and innovation. Vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity. It's the soil where trust grows. It's the foundation of meaningful relationships. So the next time you feel that lump in your throat, the sting of discomfort, the pull to retreat, pause. That's not weakness knocking. That's courage asking for a moment. That's your strength, not your shame. Perfectionism is often misunderstood. Many people think it means striving to do your best or having high standards. But that's not what perfectionism truly is. Perfectionism isn't about self-improvement. It's about fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of shame. Fear of being exposed is not enough. At its core, perfectionism is a defense mechanism. It's the armor we put on to avoid vulnerability. If I can make everything perfect, the logic goes, then I can avoid blame, criticism, and ridicule. If I can look like I have it all together, then maybe I won't have to feel the sting of rejection. Maybe I can finally feel worthy of love, respect, and belonging. But here's the painful irony. Perfectionism doesn't protect us. It isolates us. It puts walls between us and other people, and between us and our own potential. When we're constantly trying to curate our image, control every outcome, and hide our flaws, we're never truly showing up as ourselves. We're performing. And performance, no matter how polished, is not connection. The truth is, perfectionism is a moving target. No matter how hard we try, we'll never reach a point where everything is just right. There's always going to be something we could have said better, done differently, fixed or improved. It becomes exhausting. It drains our energy, creativity, and joy because we're living our lives trying to be someone we're not. And perfectionism doesn't just affect our personal lives. It seeps into our work, our parenting, our relationships. It keeps us from taking risks because we fear failing. That's why they're able to do it. But this idea couldn't be further from the truth. Fear is not the opposite of courage. Fear is the invitation to courage. Bravery is not what happens when fear disappears. It's what happens when we act despite fear. When we feel afraid, unsure, exposed, and still choose to show up. That's bravery in its truest form. In fact, if there's no fear, it's not actually courage. It's comfort. True courage requires risk. It requires emotional exposure. It requires uncertainty. And those things don't come with fearlessness. They come with trembling hands, racing hearts, and the voice in our head whispering, "What if I fail?" Courage replies, "Yes, and I'll try anyway." Brené Brown reminds us that vulnerability and courage are intertwined. You cannot have one without the other. Every act of courage is by definition an act of vulnerability. Whether it's starting a new career, ending a relationship, launching a business, saying, "I love you" first, or speaking your truth in a room full of silence, those moments are steeped in fear. But we do them not because we aren't scared, but because something in us is stronger than the fear. So many people wait for the fear to go away before they take action. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel certain. But here's the truth. If you wait to feel fearless, you'll never move. You'll stay stuck because fear never really disappears. And that's okay. It's not supposed to. Fear is not a sign you're on the wrong path. Often it's a sign you're about to do something meaningful, something that matters to you, something that stretches you beyond the safety of what you know. Being brave means standing at the edge of the unknown and stepping forward anyway. It means hearing all the doubts in your head. What if I'm not good enough? Oh, what if I fail? Oh, what if I'm judged? And choosing not to be ruled by them. It means letting fear ride in the car, but not letting it touch the wheel. Some of the most courageous people you'll ever meet aren't loud or bold in the traditional sense. They're quiet warriors, parents raising kids through heartbreak, survivors sharing their stories, artists putting vulnerable work into the world, everyday people choosing honesty over comfort. And every one of them carries fear, but they walk anyway. Bravery is not about eliminating fear. It's about honoring your fear without surrendering to it. It's feeling it fully and moving forward with it still in your chest. That's what makes courage meaningful. That's what makes it real. We live in a results-driven world, a culture that places so much value on knowing the outcome before we act, on guarantees, on predictability, uncertainty. But life doesn't work that way. The moments that shape us, that stretch us, that matter the most, they almost always involve risk. They involve uncertainty. They involve the unknown. And that's exactly where courage lives. Courage is not reserved for those who have all the answers. It's not something that waits for the stars to align. Courage is what happens when we feel exposed, unsure, and vulnerable, and we still choose to step into the moment. It's waking up and deciding to try again, even when yesterday broke you. Standing in front of people you care about and saying the hard thing, not knowing how they'll react. It's taking the leap when you can't see the landing. Most of us crave certainty. We think, if I knew this would work, I'd do it. If I knew they would love me back, I'd say how I feel. If I knew I wouldn't fail, I'd take that chance. But courage doesn't come with that kind of assurance. Courage is a decision to act when we can't control how it ends. It's the commitment to show up anyway, not because we're fearless, not because we're sure of success, but because we believe the act of showing up is worth it. It's easier to stay in the comfort zone, to only speak when you know you'll be applauded, to only create when you're sure people will approve, to only lead when you're certain no one will question you. But that's not leadership. That's not growth. That's not connection. The bravest people in the world are not those with the perfect track records. They are the ones with scars, with stories, with stumbles and setbacks, because they showed up. They tried, they risked, and they kept going even when the ending wasn't clear. Think of a first date, a job interview, a creative pitch, a difficult apology, a conversation about mental health. All of those things carry uncertainty. They carry risk, and yet we do them because deep down we know that to live fully, we must be willing to be uncomfortable. We must step into the unknown. Brené Brown talks about this through the lens of vulnerability. She calls it daring greatly. And that's what courage really is. Daring to be seen, daring to act, daring to live with an open heart, even when we don't know how the story will end. The most meaningful experiences in life, love, belonging, purpose, creativity, connection, require us to show up with no guarantees. They require presence over perfection, willingness over certainty, heart over outcome. So courage isn't about knowing, it's about showing. Showing up for yourself, for others, for the truth, even when the road ahead is foggy, even when you might fail, even when you feel alone. That is the essence of true bravery. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with curated images, polished identities, and filtered realities, authenticity has become both rare and revolutionary. We're surrounded by pressure, to perform, to please, to conform to what others expect of us. And in trying to meet those expectations, many of us end up hiding who we really are. We trade our truth for approval. We put on a mask of perfection, thinking that's what will make us worthy, respected, accepted. But the truth is, perfection doesn't create connection. Authenticity does. Authenticity is the courage to be yourself without apology. It's the decision to show up honestly, with your flaws, contradictions, values, voice, and vulnerability fully intact. It means saying, this is me. I may not be polished. I may not fit into every mold, but I'm real. That kind of presence is magnetic. It doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. In fact, it often shows up in the quietest moments, when someone tells the truth, even though it's hard, when they admit they're struggling, when they choose integrity over image. Those are moments of deep, quiet power. Perfection, on the other hand, is a performance. It's a constant effort to shape how we're perceived. It's exhausting, and worse, it's isolating. Because when you're performing, people don't connect with you. They connect with the role you're playing, and deep down you know it. So even when you're praised, even when you're admired, it feels hollow, because it's not really you they're seeing. When you're authentic, you give others permission to be real too. You become a safe space for honesty, for messiness, for growth. You create a ripple effect, because every time someone witnesses authenticity, it reminds them that they don't have to pretend either. Authenticity is also essential for self-respect. When we betray ourselves to gain approval, we may win praise from others, but we lose trust in ourselves. We feel the disconnect. We start to question our worth. On the flip side, when we honor who we are, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular, we build inner strength. We become more grounded, more confident, more at peace with ourselves. This doesn't mean authenticity is easy. It's not always comfortable to speak your truth, to set boundaries, to say no, or to admit that you're still figuring it all out. It requires discernment. It requires vulnerability. It requires us to risk being misunderstood, rejected, or even judged. But the cost of inauthenticity is far greater: disconnection from your own life. Perfection may look impressive on the outside, but it's often driven by fear. Fear of not being enough. Authenticity, by contrast, is rooted in self-acceptance. It says, I know who I am and I'm enough, even if I'm still growing, even if I make mistakes, even if I'm not everyone's idea of ideal. The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more honest ones. More people who are willing to bring their whole selves into the room. The messy, the honest, the human parts. Because when we do that, we make real connection possible. We make real life possible. Shame is one of the most powerful, painful, and paralyzing emotions we can experience. It whispers to us in our most vulnerable moments, telling us that we are not good enough, not smart enough, not successful enough, not lovable enough. Shame doesn't just say, you made a mistake. It says, you are a mistake. And when we believe it, when we carry it silently, it begins to define us. What makes shame so destructive is its ability to isolate. It convinces us that we're alone in our struggles, that if people really knew what we've been through, what we feel, or what we've done, they would walk away. And so we hide, we wear masks, we avoid conversations, we stuff down the truth. All the while, shame grows stronger in the dark. Brené Brown's work powerfully exposes this truth. Shame cannot survive being spoken. It dies in the light of empathy. When we talk about shame, when we share our story with someone who responds with compassion rather than judgment, shame loses its grip. The power it had over us begins to dissolve, because shame thrives on secrecy, but it can't survive vulnerability met with understanding. We often confuse shame with guilt, but they are not the same. Guilt is about behavior. I did something bad. Shame is about identity. I am bad. Guilt can be healthy. It can push us to make amends, to grow, to be better. But shame rarely leads to change. It leads to hiding, self-loathing, and disconnection. It keeps us stuck. To break free from shame, we need to find the courage to speak it. That doesn't mean shouting our deepest wounds to the world or sharing indiscriminately. It means finding safe, supportive spaces with trusted people where we can say, this is what I'm carrying, and be met with a me too. You're not alone. And that's the key. Connection is the antidote to shame. When we realize that we're not the only ones who feel this way, that others have made mistakes, struggled with worthiness, questioned themselves, and still found healing, we begin to feel human again, not broken, not beyond repair, just human. Naming our shame is not weakness. It's a profound act of strength. It takes incredible courage to look someone in the eye and say, this is the part of me I've been most afraid to show. And when we do, we don't just begin to heal. We invite others to heal too. Our honesty becomes an opening for someone else's freedom. Shame's most powerful weapon is silence. As long as we're quiet, it owns us. But the moment we speak, the moment we put language to what we feared, we take our power back. Because words, especially when met with empathy, dissolve shame's illusion. The illusion that we are alone, that we are unworthy, that we are beyond love or belonging. The most courageous conversations you will ever have are the ones where you tell the truth about your shame. Not just to others, but to yourself. When you say, this happened, this is what I felt, this is what I believed about myself, but I'm not hiding anymore. That's when the healing begins. That's when shame starts to shrink. That's when your story begins to transform from a burden into a bridge. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. In many cultures and environments, it's associated with weakness, fragility, or even failure. We're taught to toughen up, to stay guarded, to never let people see us sweat. But in truth, vulnerability isn't weakness at all. It's the most accurate measure of courage. It is the raw, unfiltered, honest expression of what it means to be human. To be vulnerable means to open yourself to uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It means saying, I don't know how this will end, but I'm showing up anyway. That could mean telling someone you love them without knowing if they'll say it back. It could mean sharing your art with the world, asking for help, admitting you're scared, or standing up for what you believe in when your voice is shaking. It's in those moments of vulnerability that the most powerful parts of life happen. Let's start with creativity. So every act of creativity is an act of vulnerability. Whether you're painting a picture, writing a poem, designing a product, singing a song, or offering a bold new idea in a meeting, you are putting a piece of your inner world into the outer world. There is no creativity without risk, without doubt, without fear of criticism. Yet that's the price of innovation and beauty, being seen, being judged, being rejected, but also being heard, being felt, being understood. All of that begins with vulnerability. Connection, too, cannot exist without vulnerability. Real connection, the kind that nourishes the soul, isn't built on small talk, surface-level exchanges, or polished performances. It's built on shared truths. It's built when we say, and me too. When we admit we're struggling, when we share the messy parts of our story, when we invite someone into the reality behind the smile. Vulnerability is what allows two people to truly see each other beyond titles, roles, or masks. Even in leadership, vulnerability is transformative. A leader who pretends to have all the answers breeds fear and silence. A leader who is willing to say, I don't know, but I'm here to figure it out with you, fosters trust, engagement, and loyalty. Vulnerability in leadership is not about being emotionally exposed all the time. It's about being real, transparent, and grounded in empathy. It's what creates psychologically safe environments where people feel seen and supported. And when it comes to change, whether personal, social, or systemic, vulnerability is the catalyst. You cannot change what you're not willing to face. And facing things truthfully, humbly, and fully requires vulnerability. It requires us to be honest about where we are, what's not working, and what we're afraid of. Only then can growth happen. But make no mistake, vulnerability is uncomfortable. It's that moment just before you speak your truth. It's the lump in your throat when you're about to take a leap. It's the voice in your head that asks, what if this goes wrong? But vulnerability also carries another voice, a quieter, steadier one that says, what if this changes everything for the better? Brené Brown reminds us that vulnerability isn't about winning or losing. It's about having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. It's standing in the arena of life, scraped and bruised, and saying, I'm still here. I'm still trying. That is the foundation of everything meaningful in relationships, in work, in art, in leadership, in healing. When we shut down vulnerability, we also shut down joy, gratitude, belonging, and love. Because all of those things require us to be seen, to let go of the armor, to risk heartbreak, to risk hope. So vulnerability isn't the obstacle to a full life. It is the doorway. Through it, we access our creativity, deepen our relationships, and create real, lasting transformation in our lives and in the world around us. Empathy is often seen as something soft, optional, or secondary. A nice personality trait if you have time for it. But Brené Brown makes it abundantly clear. Empathy is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's one of the most powerful tools we have for healing, for connection, and for breaking the toxic cycles of shame and isolation that hold so many people back from living fully. To understand why empathy is so important, we have to understand what shame does. Shame isolates. It convinces us that we are alone in our struggles, our fears, our flaws. It tells us you're the only one who feels this way, or worse, if anyone knew this about you, they would turn away. Shame thrives in silence, in secrecy, in the places where we believe our pain makes us unworthy of love or belonging. That's where empathy steps in, not to fix, not to judge, not to minimize, but simply to sit beside someone and say, I hear you. I felt something like that too. You're not alone. And in that moment, the spell of shame is broken. Because the truth is, shame cannot survive being spoken into a space filled with understanding. Empathy doesn't require us to have lived the exact same experience as someone else. What it does require is that we stay present, that we listen without judgment, that we resist the urge to correct or compare, and instead open our hearts enough to imagine what it might feel like to be in their shoes. It is not about saying, I know exactly how you feel, but rather, I'm here with you and I care. So many people confuse empathy with sympathy, but they are profoundly different. Sympathy often stands above and says, a poor you. It looks down and creates distance. Empathy climbs down into the pit with someone and says, you don't have to do this alone. Sympathy can unintentionally reinforce shame. Empathy dismantles it. In leadership, in parenting, in friendship, in every human relationship, empathy is the bridge. So it allows people to feel seen, heard, and safe. When someone is struggling and we meet them with empathy, we don't take their pain away, but we do give them something just as valuable. We let them know that pain doesn't make them unlovable, that they are still worthy, that they can be human without being rejected. Empathy is also a discipline. It takes practice. It requires emotional maturity and a willingness to be uncomfortable. Because to truly empathize, we must be willing to access our own painful emotions, not to make the moment about us, but so we can recognize the terrain of someone else's experience. That's hard, especially in a world that constantly urges us to stay numb, to stay detached, to stay strong. But real strength lies in connection, and connection is built on empathy. Think about the most meaningful conversations you've ever had. Chances are they weren't the ones where someone gave you advice or solutions. They were the ones where someone simply sat with you in your truth and didn't flinch. That's empathy. That's what transforms moments of fear into moments of trust. In a society often divided by fear, judgment, and misunderstanding, empathy is a radical act. It refuses to reduce people to their worst moments. It says, I will see you. All will see you. All of you, and I will stay. That kind of presence is healing. That kind of presence is rare. And that kind of presence is exactly what the world needs more of. So if you want to fight shame, start with empathy. If you want to create change, start with empathy. If you want deeper love, deeper community, deeper purpose, start with empathy. Because without it, connection is impossible. And with it, anything becomes possible. In a world that often glorifies hustle, people-pleasing, and constant availability, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, even guilt-inducing. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that saying an ooh, chi makes us difficult, that expressing our limits is rude, and that putting ourselves first is selfish. But Brené Brown challenges this narrative powerfully. Setting boundaries is not only healthy, it's essential. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are guidelines to protect what's sacred within us. They help us define where we end and where someone else begins. They clarify what is okay and what is not okay. And most importantly, they are an expression of self-worth. When we set a boundary, we are saying, I matter, my time, my energy, my emotional well-being, they matter. So many people suffer silently because they're afraid to speak their truth. They stretch themselves too thin, agree to things they don't want to do, absorb the emotional weight of others, and tolerate disrespect, all in an effort to avoid conflict or rejection. But every time we abandon our boundaries to keep the peace externally, we create a war internally. We betray ourselves, we deplete ourselves, we disconnect from our own needs, desires, and identity. Brené Brown emphasizes that compassion and boundaries are not opposites. They go hand in hand. In fact, the most compassionate people she has interviewed are also the most boundaried. Why? Because they understand something critical. If you consistently give what you don't have or offer more than you're emotionally capable of, resentment will inevitably grow. And resentment is not a foundation for love, generosity, or true kindness. Real kindness comes from a place of clarity. When we know our limits and express them honestly, we invite more honest relationships. We stop overextending and start connecting from a place of authenticity. Boundaries allow us to love without resentment, to serve without burning out, and to show up for others without disappearing ourselves in the process. But here's the hard truth. Setting boundaries often feels risky. It might mean disappointing others. It might mean disrupting patterns. It might mean being misunderstood. That's why so many people avoid it, not because they don't know their limits, but because they fear what will happen if they voice them. Yet, the cost of not setting boundaries is far higher. Without them, we end up exhausted, bitter, and disconnected from ourselves and from others. We become performative versions of who we think we should be, rather than grounded versions of who we truly are. And over time, we lose not just energy, but integrity. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are not punishments. They are expressions of self-awareness and emotional responsibility. When we say, I can't take that call right now, or I'm not comfortable discussing this, or that crosses a line for me, we are not pushing others away. We are inviting healthier, clearer, and more respectful interactions. And the beautiful thing about boundaries is that they don't just teach people how to treat us. They teach us how to treat ourselves. Every time we honor a boundary, we reinforce our own value. We build self-trust. We remind ourselves that we are worthy of protection, care, and balance, even when it's inconvenient, even when it ruffles feathers. Setting boundaries is also an act of emotional maturity. It acknowledges that we are responsible for our own feelings, just as others are responsible for theirs. It's not about controlling people. It's about taking ownership of our space, our energy, and our truth. Boundaries create freedom. They give us room to breathe, to grow, to create, to rest, and to live intentionally. They make space for joy, presence, and peace, not by keeping people out, but by letting the right people in and keeping relationships grounded in mutual respect. When people think of courage, they often imagine grand, heroic acts, the kind that make headlines or history books. But Brené Brown offers a deeper, more human definition. She reminds us that real courage isn't always loud or dramatic. It doesn't always show up in public or wear a cape. In fact, the most powerful acts of courage often happen in quiet, private moments. In the conversations we avoid, the truths we hide, and the decisions we delay, because we're afraid of what might happen if we truly show up as ourselves. Courage is not about being fearless. That's a myth. If you wait until fear is gone to act, you'll wait your entire life. Fear is natural. It's wired into our biology to protect us. But if left unchecked, fear begins to shrink our lives. It tells us to stay small, to stay silent, to stay safe. Courage doesn't deny fear. It acknowledges it, looks it in the eye, and says, I see you. But you don't get to decide. Brene makes it clear that vulnerability and courage are inseparable. You cannot be brave without being vulnerable, because every act of true courage demands uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Whether it's speaking up in a meeting, apologizing after a mistake, launching a new idea, setting a boundary, or telling someone you love them. None of these moments come with guaranteed outcomes. That's what makes them courageous. We often underestimate our own courage because we think it has to look a certain way. But courage is in the mother who gets up every day despite her doubts. It's in the student who raises their hand even when their voice shakes. It's in the leader who chooses transparency over control. It's in the person who seeks help for their mental health, admits they're struggling, or chooses to forgive someone who hasn't even apologized. These moments may never be seen by the world, but they are some of the bravest decisions a person can make. What keeps many people from stepping into courage is the belief that failure or rejection defines their worth. That's why so much courage comes from believing you are enough, even if the outcome doesn't go your way. Courage is saying, I may fail, I may fall, I may fall. People may not understand me, but my worth is not on trial here. There is also a profound kind of courage in showing up consistently, to keep loving after heartbreak, to keep trying after failure, to keep hoping after disappointment. That kind of endurance, showing up over and over again when you're tired, afraid, or uncertain, is the essence of resilience. And resilience is courage sustained over time. Courage doesn't promise comfort. Often, it will take you through discomfort, rejection, and even heartbreak. But what it does promise is integrity. It allows you to look in the mirror and know you stood for something, that you didn't shrink to fit into someone else's version of you, that you lived aligned with your values, not your fears. And here's something Brene emphasizes that's often overlooked. Courage is contagious. When one person dares to be brave, it gives silent permission for others to do the same. Your courage can spark someone else's. Your choice to speak truth, pursue healing, or walk your own path may give someone else the courage they've been waiting to find. In a culture obsessed with perfection and control, courage is radical. The choice to live wholeheartedly, to face life's uncertainty with an open heart, and to keep going even when the road is unclear. At the heart of Brené Brown's work is one profound truth. Vulnerability is not a detour on the way to courage. It is the path itself. And yet, for so many of us, vulnerability feels like something to avoid. It feels like a risk, a weakness, a crack in the armor we've carefully built to protect ourselves. But the reality is, without vulnerability, there is no courage. There's only performance, perfectionism, and the illusion of strength. Vulnerability is the emotional exposure that comes with taking risks, showing up authentically, and facing uncertainty without knowing how it will all turn out. It is not about oversharing or being emotionally reckless. It's about being honest and open about what's real inside you. It's saying, here I am, with no guarantees, no mask, and no control over how this will be received. Courage, then, is not possible without that raw moment of stepping into the unknown. Whether it's applying for a job you're not sure you'll get, opening your heart to someone after being hurt, asking for help when you're struggling, or standing up for a truth that may not be popular. All of these courageous acts are born from vulnerability. They all require you to take the leap without knowing where you'll land. And that leap is terrifying, because to be vulnerable is to risk rejection, failure, embarrassment, and disappointment. It means facing the parts of life that don't have neat answers or perfect outcomes. It's uncomfortable. It's exposing, but it's also the birthplace of growth, transformation, and real connection. You simply cannot evolve or create anything meaningful in your life without passing through the terrain of vulnerability. In fact, many people spend years, even decades, trying to avoid vulnerability, only to realize they're also avoiding joy, love, creativity, and intimacy in the process. You can't selectively numb emotion. When you shut down vulnerability, you also shut down the parts of yourself that long to be seen, loved, and known. You shut down your boldness, your originality, your capacity for meaningful change. That's why embracing vulnerability isn't weakness, the most accurate measure of bravery. It's easy to keep your heart guarded. It's easy to never try. It's easy to stay cynical and detached and convince yourself that you don't care. But real courage is standing in the truth of your humanity, messy, imperfect, and vulnerable, and saying, this is me, and I'm showing up anyway. Vulnerability also requires an extraordinary level of self-trust. It's believing that no matter how others respond to your truth, you will not abandon yourself. That even if things don't go your way, you are still true to who you are. That your worth isn't dependent on the outcome, but on your willingness to show up authentically. And perhaps most powerfully, vulnerability is contagious. When you choose to be real, when you drop the armor and speak from your heart, you give others permission to do the same. You create space for genuine connection, for mutual respect, for shared humanity. You become someone who doesn't just survive life, but who engages with it fully, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. That is the essence of courage, not the absence of fear, not perfection, but walking straight into life's uncertainty, arms open, heart exposed, and saying, I'm willing to be seen. One of the most profound ideas Brené Brown brings to light is the distinction between fitting in and belonging. Two concepts that are often confused but are, in reality, worlds apart. Fitting in is about conformity. It's about assessing the people, the culture, or the room you've walked into and twisting yourself to become what you think they want you to be. It's about adjusting, shrinking, editing, and performing. It's survival through imitation, and it often leaves us feeling more alone than ever. True belonging, on the other hand, is radically different. It's not about becoming what others want. It's about becoming who you truly are. Belonging doesn't ask you to change. It asks you to show up, whole, imperfect, and real. It's not about fitting into the world's mold, but standing firmly in your own skin and finding connection without compromising your identity. That may sound beautiful in theory, but in practice, it's often incredibly difficult. Why? Because we've been taught from an early age that we must earn acceptance through achievement, image, behavior, or agreement. We learn to read the room and morph into whoever is most likely to be liked. But every time we abandon parts of ourselves for approval, we reinforce a dangerous belief that who we truly are is not enough. And that's where Brené's insight cuts so deeply. She says, you can only truly belong when you are truly yourself. If you have to change, mute, or disguise yourself to be accepted, then the acceptance you're receiving isn't for the real you. It's for a curated version of you. And over time, that disconnection from your true identity creates a deep ache. You feel unseen, unknown, and emotionally distant even in a crowd of people who seem to like you. Real belonging requires bravery, the courage to stand alone if necessary in your authenticity. Sometimes the cost of belonging to yourself is the loss of fitting in with others. But that's the kind of integrity that leads to real connection. Because the people who truly belong in your life will not ask you to hide your light. They won't ask you to trade your truth for their comfort. They will welcome you as you are because they are committed to knowing the real you, not the version of you that plays it safe. This idea also applies to culture, organizations, and communities. Environments built on uniformity and compliance might be efficient, but they often kill creativity, diversity, and well-being. On the other hand, spaces that foster true belonging, that make it safe for people to bring their full selves to the table, are where innovation, resilience, and genuine collaboration thrive. True belonging is not passive. It's not just waiting to be accepted. It's an active choice to show up, to speak up, to stay rooted in your identity even when it's uncomfortable. It's a commitment to your own values, your own voice, and your own story. And it requires an inner strength that few are taught, but all are capable of developing. Perhaps the most powerful part of Brené's message here is that belonging begins with the self. Before we can belong anywhere else, we must first belong to ourselves. That means honoring our values even when it's unpopular. That means embracing our imperfections instead of hiding them. That means recognizing that we are worthy, not because we fit someone else's idea of enough, but simply because we are human. True belonging is not about finding a place where you are accepted. It's about carrying the courage to be yourself wherever you go and trusting that the people, opportunities, and relationships that are meant for you will respond to that authenticity. In a world that constantly tells us we are not enough, not successful enough, not attractive enough, not productive enough, the idea of living from a place of worthiness feels almost revolutionary. Yet this is exactly what Brené Brown calls us toward in her concept of wholehearted living. It's not about perfection or having it all together. It's not about pretending life is always joyful or pain-free. Instead, wholehearted living is a way of moving through the world with the belief that we are worthy of love, belonging, and joy right now, exactly as we are. It starts with the core truth that worthiness is not something we earn. It's not dependent on our achievements, our image, or the approval of others. Worthiness is not a prize at the finish line. It's a birthright. And the moment we accept this, everything changes. We stop hustling for validation. We stop hiding our imperfections. We begin to show up authentically because we no longer feel we have to prove our value. We already believe it. Wholehearted living is rooted in courage, compassion, and connection. The three pillars that Brené Brown identifies as essential to a meaningful life. Courage, not as heroism, but as the willingness to be vulnerable, to be seen. This is me without the need to mask or perform. Compassion, not just toward others, but toward ourselves. The ability to speak kindly to ourselves in moments of struggle instead of defaulting to shame or self-criticism. Connection, not based on shared perfection, but on shared humanity. The ability to form deep bonds because we dare to be real, to be flawed, and to be enough. Wholehearted living also means embracing joy and gratitude, even when it feels risky. Many people live in fear of joy, afraid that if they let themselves fully feel happiness, something bad will happen and take it away. This kind of foreboding joy, as Brene calls it, robs us of the richness of the present moment. Wholehearted living calls us to push past that fear and anchor ourselves in gratitude, not as a shallow attitude, but as a deliberate practice of noticing what's good, even when life is hard. Another vital part of wholehearted living is the willingness to rest, to play, and to create boundaries. In a culture that idolizes burnout and glorifies overachievement, choosing rest can feel like rebellion. But when you live from a place of worthiness, rest is not laziness. It's wisdom. It's saying, I don't have to earn the right to pause. My value isn't tied to my productivity. Play and rest are essential for resilience, for joy, and for emotional health. And people who live wholeheartedly make space for them, unapologetically. This way of living also involves letting go of the things that no longer serve us. Shame, comparison, guilt, fear of judgment, and the exhausting need for certainty. It means releasing the armor we wear to protect ourselves and trusting that our true selves are strong enough to face the world without it. Wholeheartedness isn't a destination. It's a practice, a conscious choice we make every day. A choice to wake up and say, I'm enough. A choice to live aligned with our values, even when it's uncomfortable. A choice to keep our hearts open, even after they've been broken. It's not always easy. In fact, it's one of the most courageous ways to live, because it means showing up fully, knowing that life offers no guarantees, but showing up anyway. So, as we take in all of these truths about vulnerability, courage, worthiness, and belonging, we're faced with a simple but life-altering question. Are we willing to show up? Not as perfect versions of ourselves, not as people who always have the answers, but as humans who are real, messy, and brave enough to live fully and love deeply. The path Brené Brown invites us to walk is not always easy. It asks for honesty, emotional risk, and self-compassion. But it's also the path that leads to freedom. The freedom to live without shame, to connect without masks, and to lead without fear. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were all along, before the world told you who to be. So dare to be seen. Dare to be vulnerable. Huggies me. Dare to live, love, and lead with your whole heart, because you are already enough and your life is waiting for you to show up as exactly who you are.